fresh out the oven, it's Cinema Bums. I'm Wade.
And I'm Emmett.
Cinema Bums is a podcast where we watch through every single movie in popular film franchises, one each week, to try and track how the storytelling changes over time. Today we are continuing our miniseries, Denny for Two, covering every film directed by Denis Villeneuve, leading up to Dune. We will fully spoil today's film, but we will not spoil any future entries in the series. Emmett, how are you doing?
I'm doing great today because I came up with a good joke that I want to lay on all of you right here at the beginning before you can stop me.
Okay.
Which is, what did Oresteia say to France and England when he wanted them to help him invade his stepfather's home?
Hold on. Against the war. No.
If you're not with us, you're against us.
Wow.
Okay. How are you doing, Wade?
Maybe a little bit worse than I was 30 seconds ago, but still good, I would say. I'm doing particularly good because today we're honored to have a special guest. This is the intro that Emma wrote for you, Charles. I want you to know. He's an English teacher, a director, and a Jeopardy champion, perhaps better known to our audience as being Good Crew. Please welcome Charles Temple.
Yeah, thank you guys. Thank you.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Yeah, the epithet Good Crew came about from years ago when Emmett was about 5 or 6 years old, and we'd caught a fish. We were on his dad's boat, and the sharpest knife on the boat was approximately sharp enough to cut butter that had been sitting out of the fridge for a few minutes. And I'm trying to cut the head off this big mackerel, and it's flopping around and spraying me with scales and blood. And Emmett's saying, "Why are you cutting him? Why is he bleeding? Why doesn't he want you to cut him?" And just as I'm thinking about turning on the knife on Emmett, he turned to his mama and said, "Charles is good Crew." So murder flowed out of me, unfortunately. I did not commit the act of family violence, which would have been a nice lead-in for today's movie.
Yes. That would have been thematically relevant.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you for having me. I'm really delighted to be here.
Thank you for being here.
We're happy to have you. How's it going?
It's going well. It's been a good summer. I'm out on Ocracoke with Emmett, and it's been a busy summer, and things have been cooking right along.
Hell yeah.
Oh, cool.
Had you ever seen this movie? Incendies is what we're talking about today. Had you ever seen it before?
Seen or heard of this movie. I'd seen Arrival. I told Emmett the other day, I saw Sicario, but I didn't know I was supposed to be paying attention to it. I didn't know it was, I just thought it was a movie I had on. Mm-hmm. And I've seen Blade Runner 2049.
Okay.
And I saw part of Prisoners when you guys told me about this. I saw that Prisoners was on Hulu, and I started watching it. And it was so bleak that I got busy with something else and turned it off, and I never went back to it. But I might go back to it now. I'm sort of intrigued after this film.
That's what we're doing next week. Would you say it was more bleak than this one?
Yeah, actually.
Holy hell, dude.
Yeah, so I don't know how it ends. I know, but it takes place around Christmas in central Pennsylvania. So everything is grayscale. Everybody's dressed in sort of brown down jackets, and but like I said, it's something I'm looking forward to going back to, having seen this one, because I don't know, this movie got to me.
Yeah, to me too, for sure. Emma, had you seen this one before?
I had not. This one also has stuck with me, though. I've been thinking about it. And it's also made me think about a lot of the other plays and movies that I know that are about a similar subject, about tracking lost family through a war zone, and what that is kind of like. I feel like there's a lot of plays and movies in that thematic realm that have interesting similarities with this film.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of thematic stuff in this where you can tell it was a play, for sure.
Yes, yeah, for sure.
There's some stuff that I'll talk about a little later that I wonder if it was specifically in the play, like the stuff with the tattoo on the heel. Whether that was a cinematic addition or because I've got some thoughts about that, but we'll get to that.
We'll talk a little bit about how the adaptation happened later. But I know that none of the dialogue from the play is in the movie.
That's interesting.
it's all of the dialogue is original, but I think I read that the structure of the play is the same as the movie.
It's like that classic well-made play thing of like there's a premise and there's 3 letters, and once you deliver the first 2 letters, you get to read the third, and it's going to explain everything. And it's like kind of a promise. It's interesting that this is a movie about promises and about keeping promises. And it's, I think, the first movie that Denny makes where he keeps his promise as a storyteller to like, I'm going to tell you everything. By the end of this movie, you will understand everything that went on and why it all fit together and why it was all important. And he delivers on that promise with the final letters. I mean, how you feel about that ending is one thing, but I feel like it really ties up all of the knots that it says it's going to at the beginning.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
If it was you, if it was either of you guys, would you just open the letter? Just when you were on your own, would you have done it?
Steamed it open and taken a look?
You mean the one that you're given to deliver?
Yeah, the one you have to deliver.
I mean, it kind of depends on what you go through. I mean, the brother went through so much less in his quest than the sister did,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to watch this movie again, but I kind of want to watch this movie again because there's some stuff I want to untangle about timeline and whatnot that was not immediately apparent. And, I think this movie would bear rewatching, although tumbler of very good gin would probably help.
Yeah, whether you could bear rewatching it is another matter, right?
Right.
The movie could bear rewatching, but...
Man, it is true that there is, like, stuff in this movie that when you're watching it the first time, you think it's, like, the most horrible thing you could see. But, like, rewatching it and knowing really what's going on makes it even worse than the first time.
There were a couple of instances of that where he's given you enough insight into what's going on. Like when they're talking to the nurse who's in the hospital bed and you're like, one of you is very confused. And the dramatic irony there, I thought was really, really effective.
And that's something that I feel like is like a play, like we were talking about. Like that feels very heightened. That heightened dramatic irony feels like something you see on stage a lot. And I love it when it happens in movies, but I feel like movies are less like artful in that way sometimes.
Yeah.
Right before we dive into it, let me say at the top that Bumtober is coming, where you'll be able to vote on a series that we will have to cover. So send your series suggestions you want to be included. You can email us cinemabumspod@gmail.com, or you can DM us on Instagram @cinemabums. Charles, is there any series you'd like to see us cover in the future?
I mean, I was curious because I introduced Emmett, among other series. I'd forgotten that I introduced Emmett to X-Men. X-Men was sort of my falling out of love with superhero movies.
Ours too.
Right. And that was a break that has only recently sort of shaken itself free. But I would be interested to see you guys cover some Star Wars stuff. I know it's been done, and I know it's the sort of series for a lot of people, and it's sort of part of my foundational mythology as a person. I think I should mention the extent to which I am the oldest guest you have had on. I think if you took the age of any 2 previous guests and added them and occasionally multiplied them, you would get close to my age. So, but I would love to hear what y'all's take on the Star Wars series was, and I would love to make you watch the prequels one at a time and talk about it. I think that would be fun to enforce on you.
The biggest problem, and the reason why we have not figured out how or when or where we're going to do Star Wars yet, and correct me if I'm wrong, Wade, but like one of the biggest problems here is that we can't figure out what order we'd watch them in.
Right.
Whether we'd watch them in chronological or release order. And then if we do that, I mean, we commit to watching all of them. So that means like all the extra ones too, like Solo and...
Well, yes, but does it mean
One.
like the Ewok movie, Caravan
I think it means
Courage,
the Ewok movie.
the Clone Wars.
I think it means the Clone War movies.
So I should let you guys know, I do have a CD copy of the Christmas special, the repudiated and unwatchable Christmas special.
And we'd have to watch that too.
Only use it if I can be your special guest on that particular one.
Okay, sold.
We would only watch it if you were our special guest. We
fair
would
enough.
not watch it otherwise.
We would not watch it unless you also had to go through that misery with us.
We put it on one year. Chrissy got it for me. My fiance got it for me for Christmas one year. And we put it on with family around. And within 15 minutes, everybody had just left the room.
It clears the room.
To go change the oil or do some laundry or get your taxes squared away for the upcoming tax season. It was brutal.
It is that kind of movie. It's a movie that is so bad you can't even just have it on.
No, it sucks good art off the wall.
It's worse than if you just put on a station of just commercials.
Or like Guiding Light reruns from 1992.
I am pretty intimidated by Star Wars. I just feel like it is, I mean, you kind of mentioned this, Charles. Star Wars is like everything to everyone. So I feel like it's so hard to get on here and talk about how we feel about Star Wars when everyone listening feels like some other very specific way about it.
That's fair. That's fair. Although you guys got into that some with Twilight.
True.
That is true.
Not so much with Denny. I think people kind of feel the same way about Denny's movies. Oh,
wow.
Yes.
I will say that I'm becoming a true Denny fan, though. Like, over the course of, even though all of these have been hard to watch, like, we're coming up on the ones that I do like, and I've been tracking this, and it is like, the development is intense. His voice has always been there. He's pretty cool.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to going back, having listened to your podcasts on his previous stuff. I hadn't seen any of his previous stuff, which makes me exactly like 99.5% of Americans. But yeah, I'm looking forward to going back and tracking those down one way or another.
This is the one that sort of got me really back into him, because I feel like I was fading out a little with the last two.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I do think he really delivered in this one. So this one we're talking about today, we're talking about Incendies, which is the French word for fires, was not retranslated here in America. Apparently in other countries, it was retitled The Woman Who Sings.
Oh.
That's okay.
They kept the French name for this.
I read, Wade, in the English language adaptation of the play that this was based on, the title is changed to Scorched.
Okay.
I mean, Scorched is better than Fires, but
Yeah.
I think Incendies works.
I think Incendies works perfectly, but I also like Woman Who Sings pretty well.
Yeah.
This is the fourth film directed by Denis Villeneuve. It is based on the 2003 play Incendies by the Lebanese-Canadian playwright Wajdi Mouawad. The script was written, for the movie, was written by Denis and Valerie Beaugrand-Champagne. So no credit for the playwright. Like we said, this was all the dialogue is totally original. It runs 2 hours and 10 minutes, which is an hour and 12 minutes longer than his previous longest film. This is basically two of his previous movies put together. And it was released on September 17th, 2010. A year and a half after his last movie, Polytechnic. He shot them pretty close back to back, and he calls the two of these movies his twins. And just a couple of things I want to note here, a couple of firsts here. This was his first film to come to America, to play in American theaters. It was released by Sony Picture Classics in 2010. It's his first film to be a commercial success, and his first film to be nominated for the Best Foreign Language Film at the Oscars. And I guess his only film, because all of his after this are in English. So this would be his last foreign language film. And it did win Best Motion Picture at the Canadian Screen Awards.
Making him 4 for 4.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Step it up, English-speaking Canada.
Yeah, for real.
Okay, now is the time for the summary. I just want to say, if you have been listening to this podcast so far, and this movie sounds kind of interesting to you, know how hard it is to watch, but maybe go and watch it before the rest of the podcast, because I do think that it really helps to see this one knowing nothing about it.
I 100% agree.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. If you have any desire to see this film, you should watch it first before we get any further into what the mechanics of the plot are.
And I will say I was gripped by the film.
Yeah.
It was hard to watch, but at no time was I told you I sort of walked away from Prisoners, but
yeah,
I never had an impulse to do that. I found this film completely engrossing and absolutely worth the time.
So that being said, like, for those who are maybe going to pause this now, and this is a movie about some kids whose mother dies and leaves them instructions to uncover her past before they can have a proper funeral for her, essentially. That's the very brief overview. Okay, turn this podcast off and go watch the movie. Now, for people who have watched the movie, wasn't wasn't woof, right? Wow.
Welcome back. We're sending you a hug.
Okay, we're sending you a hug. Like, it's gonna be.
We're sorry.
It's gonna be all right. It's gonna be there. But all right. So the overview of this movie first begins with this crazy long sequence of just these boys in a prison somewhere getting their heads shaved, like looking like they're being turned into child soldiers or something. Mm-hmm. And we see one with this tattoo of 3 dots on his ankle, and the camera like gets really intense on his face, and you just have that long look in the kid's eyes as he's getting his head shaved, which is how the whole thing opens. So you're like, oh God, this is going to be rough. It lets you know up front. Then cut to some unspecified amount of time later. We're in a notary's office in Canada. These 2 children have just found out, or their mother has just died, and they're getting the
probably
will
like,
read.
What would you say, like 19, early 20s?
I would say they're early 20s.
I'd say they're early 22, 23.
And it's strange because she seems a lot older than he does.
But they're twins.
They're twins. We know that they're definitely twins. So it's hard to parse because he seems like he could definitely be 19 and she seems like she could be maybe like late 20s. Mm-hmm. But I think we have to take the average of that.
The brother is played by the actor who played the killer in Polytechnic.
Okay, I thought so, but I wasn't for sure. Okay, that's interesting. Anyway, they read the will. The notary says basically, your mother doesn't want to be buried or have any sort of funeral, any prayers said for her, or any headstone with her name on it until you can do these things that she's asked for in her will. And the 2 things that she asked for is she tells the daughter that their father is still alive and that they can find him and give him this letter. And she gives her a letter. And then the notary turns to the son and says, and your brother is still alive. Find him and give him this letter. And once you've done that, there's a 3rd letter for the 2 of you to read that will explain everything. And the part that really stuck out to me is she says, childhood is a knife stuck in the throat. And you're like, oh, okay. And she says something like, no rest for promise breakers. And you're like, wow. So we've got a lot to unpack here.
Well, and she asked to be buried naked, face down. With no coffin. Like, just basically drop her in on her face and cover her up. And it's not until they've done this that they can put a stone with her name in the sun. It was a striking phrase. And I didn't jot it down, and it comes up later in the movie, and I didn't jot it down there either. But
there is this thing with sunlight too. There's like this whole thing going on where oftentimes the back of the frame is like brightly lit, but the people in the foreground are in shadow. Mm-hmm. And like the focus of the scene is on the foreground, like on what's happening in the foreground, but the people are like obstructed, like you can't see their face, and they're in shadow, but there's light behind them. So it's like this whole movie is about like striving towards the light of truth, basically. Like all these characters are faced away from the truth of what's going on, and they need to face that light. Pretty heavy visual symbolism to be getting into with all that.
One thing you skipped, which is later sort of relevant, is we have the long opening scene, which is like the zoom in on the child soldier. Then the next scene is this long shot of the notary, the Canadian notary, who is like becomes an important character, who's this sort of big genial guy. But it's a shot of him in the basement, sort of by a file, and he's like holding himself up against the wall and like breathing heavily and like going through something. It's like a long shot in on him, and then we cut to the first scene.
Oh, I'd forgotten about that.
Yeah, this is not going to be an easy movie to summarize. Strap in, guys, because there's going to be a little bit of but what we forgot to tell you.
Yeah, exactly. So then, and I'm going to try and do this right, but basically there's several different parts set apart by title cards, like acts of the movie, but I would say there's like 7 or 8 of them. So I'm not even going to try and keep all of that.
I wrote them all down. It's more like 10 or 12. It's a good font too. But yeah, we don't have to talk about all of them.
We don't have to talk about all of those. We get into all of that. But slowly what happens is first the daughter goes to where their mother is from. So their mother was an immigrant from some Middle Eastern country. That's never nailed down in the movie, although it's suggested by a lot of the details that it's Lebanon due to stuff that was going on with the Lebanese Civil War during the same time period that this movie takes place in. And this story, the play, is somewhat based off of a real Lebanese woman's life. and some things that she did during the Civil War there. So the daughter goes to Lebanon to try and track down where her mother was from, find out where their father could possibly be, where their brother might possibly be, because her twin brother wants nothing to do with any of it. He is like out on the whole thing. He's pissed. He obviously has some issues with their mom that they like never resolved. So the sister goes on this long journey. She slowly uncovers their mother's past. And in between this, we, the audience, get cut-ins of the mother's past. And we learn things often like a little bit before the daughter does, so that we have the dramatic irony of getting to watch her uncover the things that we've seen, or we'll see details and not put it together until she puts it together in interesting ways. Okay, so we cut in with their mom early on, and we see her in love with the son of a refugee, probably a Palestinian refugee from the south. He is shot by her brothers, and just like this really brutal scene where her brothers kill her lover and then are about to kill her until her grandmom comes and saves her. And then her grandmother's beating her and saying, "What should I do? Should I kill you? And like, you've brought dishonor on the family." And she says that she's pregnant and now she's going to have a kid by this guy her brothers have just killed. And so we see her give birth to this child. We see this child tattooed with the 3 dots that we saw at the very beginning of the movie.
By the grandmother.
And then we see the baby is shown to the mom so that he'll remember her face, and then is like spirited away in the middle of the night to an orphanage so that it won't be a shame on the family as much.
Correct me if I'm wrong, because I feel like both of you maybe know more about the actual real world events of this. Uh-huh. But in the movie, they don't talk about actual countries at all, because it's like a fictional approximation of what's really happening.
Yes.
So it's mostly through the frame of like a civil war between a Muslim culture and a Christian culture.
Yeah, that's what makes it Lebanon. Lebanon has a Muslim Arabic population, a Christian population. I can't remember if it's Coptic Christian. I can't remember, but a Christian population,
Eastern Orthodox,
and a Jewish population. And their constitution after the Civil War now calls for the presidency, the prime ministership, and some other major thing to be shared among those 3 groups. Been going better than it was. The Lebanese Civil War was, like all civil wars, just really brutal and nasty and
lasted for 15 years too.
Wow.
And it's kind of complicated because in this movie, she and her family are Christians from the mountain region. Mm-hmm. And the man who's shot is probably a Palestinian Muslim, or maybe an Arab Christian from Palestine. But there's tension there because he's from Palestine. And then there's Palestinian liberation people coming in from the south. And then there's Christians coming down and attacking them who are part of the official government. But then there was also this other like right-wing Christian party that gets involved. And so it's like all of these different militias who all have different things that they're supporting. And it basically like broke down into multiple different city-states all fighting each other, all with their own like kind of mafia-like pseudo militia army, but also just like organized crime basically. Which is kind of what you see is like how at the beginning she has like some sort of political ideology. They're like student protesters and stuff like that. But by the end of it, she's fought on both sides of the Civil War. And her kids, like her child, has also fought on both sides of the Civil War. So it just, I guess, like messy and horrible.
Yeah, messy and horrible. Although it is not really a war movie. I mean, her involvement in the war itself is contained to a couple of fairly brief little stints. She's a member of a sort of a peace party that's trying to transcend the religious and sectarian divides. And then that breaks down. And then later, you'll get to it, she takes an active part in the war. But it's not really about the war. It's about what the war does to her.
After giving up her baby, she moves to the city to be with her more like metropolitan liberal-minded relatives there, who are part of, like, as you said, the Peace Party. And they're part of a newspaper that's trying to print like anti-war stuff, trying to bring peace between the Christian government and the Muslim government or the Muslim factions. And then the city is being evacuated. They're all going to go up into the mountains. She doesn't want to go back there, probably a lot because of her stuff with her family still, but also because she's still looking for her son. And it's 4 years later, I think. And she's like, I'm going to go down and find him in the south where I know he is. And so she heads down that way. When she gets there, the whole town has been razed, and it's been like people have been killed. The children have been taken. She has no idea where anybody is. So she's searching and searching. She sees people coming from the south, and she's like, oh, well, these are Muslims. So then she's a Christian. She's like, I'm going to like cover my head with a scarf and pretend to be Muslim with them. And she gets on the bus, and then the bus gets attacked by Christian terrorists, and they kill everyone on the bus except her, because at the last minute she says, I'm a Christian. She holds up her cross, and then they like burn the whole bus and leave her.
And kill a little girl. That she tries to save. That she says, this girl is my daughter. And there's like, also this movie does this a lot where it teases the kids. It's like, is this really going to turn out to have been one of them? Is this going to turn out to have, like, their mom is not really their mom? Like, she really saved them from some terrible situation. And then like, it's not that, because those kids get killed in horrible ways. The binding to all of the stuff in the past is that we know that there's a brother and we know that there's a dad.
Right.
And we don't know who those people are.
Right. And we see a man who is the father of her first child get killed.
Right. And that the brother is the kid with the dots on his heel, that he survived at least through infancy. Because when we see him, he's about 6 or 7, maybe.
Yeah. When you see him getting captured, it's about 6 or 7. And you put together, by the time you see her in the village, you put together that those people kidnapped him and took him wherever that was. So then she's trying to track those people down.
My understanding of this, she's trying to find the son. She like goes on a mission at some point where she's like, all I want to do is find the son, which eventually leads her back to like the charred remains of where he was being kept.
Right. But then she gets picked up by the Christian terrorists, and then she's working for the leader of the right-wing Christian group. And at a certain point, she tries to kill him. And at that point, it does not appear to me that it is like a politically motivated action, or that she's doing it for any idealistic purpose or for any other party or group. She's doing it for herself because of what this guy did to her and her family.
To the orphanage where her son was.
Into the town. Exactly.
But she is doing it in affiliation with someone else, which kind of took me by surprise the first time, because she gets a call that is like, tomorrow at 10 a.m.
Oh.
And she's like, okay, today's the day, tomorrow at 10 a.m.
Really? I'd missed that.
So all of this is interspersed in flashback, right? So the way Emmett's telling it, it's not remotely this linear in the film. It's not super jangly or disorienting the way the story's told. This is the backstory that gets filled in throughout.
Right. Because at the same time, we're watching the daughter uncover all of this through a long series of going around the different places, getting jerked around by different people, having to investigate places, and like people telling her, you don't know who your mother is. You're not welcome here if you're really her daughter, and like her mother has this name here as the woman who sings. And we slowly get to understand that's because after she tried to assassinate, or she did assassinate the Christian leader, it's unclear in the movie whether she's successful. In the true story, the woman was unsuccessful. She did attempt to assassinate the leader, and he was in the hospital for like 8 weeks with serious injuries. But he did eventually survive, and she was kept in prison for several years, eventually released in 2000, and has since written, I think, a couple books about it.
I think she is successful in the movie.
In the movie, she actually does manage to kill him.
Yeah. I think someone says like she killed him in the present when they're explaining.
So everybody's like, so she's infamous there. And of course, she brought like a curse on her whole, everybody associated with her was in a lot of danger after she did that. She was held in prison for 15 years. And what the daughter discovers is that while she was in prison there was a torturer who was brought in to rape her, and that she eventually was impregnated by that torturer, and that she gave birth in the prison. Now, as we hear her learn this, she believes she's learning the origin story of her brother.
And we, as viewers, are kind of thinking that too, because the mom has gone to find the first child and has been told that everyone was killed.
Right, exactly. And so we're like, oh, well, maybe.
So we feel like back to square one.
We're back to square one. That first child was dead. And this is another brother who we've had no idea about.
I don't know. I think I was pretty well home that this was where the twins came from.
Yeah.
Okay. This was a major twist for me.
Well, when they said that she was kept for 15 years and then she had kids towards the end of it, I was like, well, then yeah, they've got to be
right. And
those
the
kids.
revelation that she was kept for 15 years is actually punched up because the daughter is looking for this prison where her mother was held, and she goes and visits the prison with this guy who's the janitor at the school but used to be a guard, and he takes her through and says that some people were held here for as many as 15 years. And then later her mom says, I've been here for 15 years or something like that. Like, then you discover that she was the one who was held the longest and had it the worst. And he makes a point of saying that she never broke. They never broke her. They never got to her, that she took everything they had to throw at her.
And that she would sing, and that was how she proved that.
Yeah. And not well. It's funny. You would think the woman who sings that she would have a lovely singing voice. She doesn't. She sings sort of like anybody would sing, sort of who isn't a good singer. I mean, she doesn't sing well or melodiously or beautifully.
I thought that was a wonderful touch. And so this old guy, tells her like the whole story of the woman who sings, and she's realizes that that's her mother. And then we see her deliver. So we cut in flashback. We go back and see her deliver, and we see her deliver twins. And then we're like, uh-oh.
Yeah. And whether or not you have figured it out by this point, it is framed by a twist that certainly worked on me, because she gives birth to the first child. It's a boy. You're like, okay, that's the son. And then the nurse comes back in and she's like, all right, get ready for number 2.
Yeah.
So after the delivery of the babies, there's a man and a woman who are out back, and she says, what are you going to do with him? He says, I'm going to do what I always do, which is put him in the river, because this torturer uses rape as a major instrument of his torture. So presumably there have been other babies who have been cast off. So he's going to put them in the river. And she says, no, let me take them and I'll care for them. And so she rescues these 2 babies because they're the children of the woman who sings. So she's taken on this sort of sacred identity or something for the people in the prison. For the guards, for the people who have to deal with the prison.
Yeah, and so the kids are rescued. Cut back to the 2010 plot line. The daughter still thinks that that's their brother. So she's like, I found our brother, though. I know where he was born, and I know where to find the nurse who delivered him. She calls her twin brother and says, you got to come. You got to come and do the thing. So he finally shows up.
He shows up along with the Canadian notary.
He explicitly does not want to look for his father or his brother. And when the notary
doesn't want to get
clues him into the fact that that's kind of who they're looking for, he's furious, right? He feels like he's being manipulated.
Yes. And then he comes and the nurse sees them both and starts crying and is like, it's the 2 of you, and tells them says their names in
Arabic,
which are Sarwan. It's close to their names.
Jean and
French.
Simone.
John and Simone, and it's Sarwan for Simone and
Janan, Janaan.
So then, oh God, where are we now? Because
the game's afoot at this point.
Game is afoot. And so now the brother is sort of sucked into the quest, right? He's been resisting the quest. What they realize is that they can track the brother who was given up. So the mother of the 2 twins, and the one whose woman death precipitates all this, when she gives up her baby to her grandmother and goes to the city, her grandmother takes it to an orphanage, and he's known just by his name and of May. Do you have his name written down? I should have taken notes, but I was enthralled by this point in the movie. My notes completely peter out about 35 minutes into the movie.
Nihad
of May.
So there are no records or anything, but somebody says there's this Christian warlord who is the sort of man who would have a good memory. Even though it's been 20 years, he might remember. And he says, well, how do we find him? And he said, you don't find him, he finds you. And they say to Simone, the brother, said, now it's your turn. So he has to go track down this Lebanese warlord. Easy money. That's an easy ticket to get, right?
The twin brother has sort of as lovely of an arc as you can have in this movie, of sort of like becoming a believer in his family and his mother, and like rediscovering the past, which he has been resisting the whole movie over like the last half an hour.
Yeah.
And so around this time too, we see in flashbacks the firstborn child, Nihad, their brother, as a teenager or an adult sniping a bunch of little children.
He kills one like 8-year-old kid, and maybe he gets the second who peeks up from behind the car, maybe he doesn't. But yeah, I mean, for absolutely no reason. Like, these kids are not hurting anybody, and he just shoots them because he's got a beat on them.
Yeah.
And that's just a little like 6-minute cutaway where you're like, okay, well, here's kids running through the streets. Maybe this will be nice.
Nope.
Yeah, this movie really is like, at every moment, women and children are in every type of violence imaginable, like physical, sexual, emotional, verbal violence being done upon people at every point in this movie.
You know, Wade, your point last week about maybe he's someone who is just so horrified by the violence of the world that he has to like look at it, can't look away, and like has to force everybody to deal with it too. Like, I feel like I really felt that this time around watching this one.
Well, after we get to the end, I will say my take, because I think there is a message that has run through all of these so far.
Okay.
That ties them together. Too.
Interesting. Okay. So, God. All right. We're still in this. We've seen what the brother is like doing kind of in his middle years. And we know that like whatever these kids find out about their older brother, it's not going to be happy news.
And now we have both of the numbers on the board, right? We know that the brother was a child soldier who has the tattoo, and we know that the father was the rapist who tortured their mother in prison.
Exactly. And so they're like, we know who we're looking for, and they're following the trail of the brother. He gets to see the warlord. Well, so first he's there and he's blindfolded, and he's with all of the warlord and like a bunch of guards and a bunch of other people who are all just like there. And then when he says who he is,
right, I'm the son of the woman who sings.
The guy says,
like, give us the room.
Tells everybody else to leave. And he like comes over and takes the blindfold off of him. And he like tells him what happened to his brother. And he says, your brother was like one of the most skilled marksmen ever for me. He was one of my child soldiers. But then he was captured by the right-wing Christian forces. And he was tortured, and he was brainwashed, and he was like made into a marksman for them. And he became a torturer.
Simone says, did he work with my father? And he said, no, he didn't work with your father. And at this point, readers of Greek tragedy will maybe have little alarm bells going off in the backs of their heads.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Anybody who's ever read anything in the history of plays is like,
yeah. This to me, like, it is shocking and horrible, and we'll dive into it. But I saw people being like truly like affronted by this twist, and I was like, you guys probably do not read that many plays.
Yeah, right.
This was slightly familiar to me.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, I don't think the fact that it's slightly familiar like lessens its impact.
Oh no, not at all.
And it feels honestly like almost more inevitable. Like as it starts to spool out, you're like, oh God, this is what it is.
Like I got there. I can't remember exactly when the penny dropped for me, but I think it might have been when you find out that she was raped over and over again in prison. I was like, well, that's one possible way for this to go. That's partly English teachers spoiling all the stories forever.
Right. Exactly. So Simone, Sauron like realizes what this means, and he has this moment where he comes back to his sister and says, 1 and 1 makes 2, right? Is there any way for 1 and 1 to make 1? 1 and 1 makes 2.
Because there's also been a math theme.
There's been a math
running
theme
throughout this movie.
I forgot to mention there's a math theme.
It didn't really run through the movie. It got dropped in at the very beginning because she's an assistant or the teaching assistant to an eminent math professor in pure mathematics. And then that goes away completely. At no point during her search does her sort of abstraction of pure mathematics play any part of her investigation. And I don't know if that's a missed opportunity, but it's certainly something he could have. I don't know. I don't have an idea that, what if he had done this? But I don't know why you make her a math professor if it's just for this line. Does 1 and 1 always equal 1?
I would say none of the twins' skills or personality really figure into the plot actions that they each undertake.
Well, and that goes back to Greek tragedy. But I digress, and I've got more to say about that. And I'll let Emmett finish up his heroic attempt to
Yes, true.
to explain this.
I think we're an hour in at this point.
So basically, he goes back. He's like, "This is what it is."
So spell it out for us, Evan. Spell it out.
Spell it out for us. Just spell it out for you. Their brother is their father. Their brother was a sniper for the Muslim people at the beginning and then was captured by the Christians, turned into a torturer and rapist for them, who was used against his own mother much later in prison while she was being held there.
Unknowingly.
And then the two children that she has in prison are the two kids that we begin the movie with, Simone and Jean. Now they have discovered this, and they even know where to find him.
The twin sisters gasp when she realizes is insane. I mean, it's almost like a jump scare. Like her reaction to finding out the truth.
Yeah, it's funny. I was watching the two actors, so closely when they realized that they are the twins in the scene with the nurse. Like I couldn't decide which one to keep my eyes on. I mean, I was flipping back and forth to see who the penny dropped for first. And that was a very understated reaction. And then that scene in the hotel room where he comes back and tells her what's going on was so much more traumatic. And I mean, for very real reasons.
Yeah.
And by that point in the movie, you're pretty wrung out,
Yeah.
Yeah. This is probably like, what would you say, an hour 50 into this 2:10 movie when
probably.
we get the revelation?
Yeah. I mean, and it's paced out, but it's tough. It's just...
The first twist that they're the twins, I want to say, is about an hour and a half.
That sounds about right.
So it really is like the last 40 minutes that is sort of the downward chase to figure all of this out.
Yeah. And so then they are also able to track down where this guy has gone afterwards, because the warlord has like connections still who know where to find him.
Yeah, because after the war, he was basically a war criminal, and they just got him out of the country.
Yeah, they got him out of the country. And it turns out he's back in Quebec, just working as a janitor somewhere. Then we get in this weird flashback. We cut back to just like a month before their mom died. They were at the swimming pool. And the swimming pool has kind of been a visual theme throughout this movie.
And we have seen this incident where the mother had some sort of attack that like caused her to go
caused her downward spiral.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have seen that before.
Although it was not at all clear what was happening the first time.
Yeah, it just looked like like she just like went away inside for no reason while she was at the pool. But we see that it's because she came up from underwater and saw at the edge of the pool the heel with the 3 dots in it. And she looked up and saw her son and also the father of the 2 children that she's there with.
So you see his face in the prison, and then you see his face again. But that was actually a moment where I was sitting there asking myself, and finally asked Emmett, we were watching it. I said, that is the same guy, right? Because at that point it felt totally inevitable that had to be the same guy, but I didn't make the facial. Now I'm terrible with faces.
I didn't either.
I'm terrible with faces. And he had a beard, sort of a short beard the second time, and he's older.
And he's like 20 years older.
Yeah, and he's got hair on his head. He's got a head of hair, but where his head was shaved at first. But like I said, I was there, but I didn't have the shock of recognition. I mean, I saw the heel, but I didn't see the guy and say, shoot, that's the same guy.
Yeah.
This to me was a bridge too far. Not that it like ruined anything, but this was just like a little too convenient for me to really buy. That he had been from the same small other part of the world, had ended up in this completely distant other part of the world, and was just at the same pool as the rest of his family.
I don't know. Immigrant communities settle in the same, they end up in the same cities, they end up in the same neighborhoods,
Also, Denny is obsessed with chaos theory. And like dynamic motion of individual particles. And like this movie is kind of about like how the turbulence of war can like send individual particles on like weird journeys, but there's like a strange attractor to family that like always brings it back around.
Okay.
Sorry, I've been reading some deep theory recently, and maybe getting a little too far out on that stuff. But that's what I see in that.
Wade, I'm partly on board with you. When she sees the 3 dots, and she just swims up to the side of the pool, and there are just these 3 guys standing there having a chat, and she sees the back of this guy's foot. I don't know. It feels inevitable in that way, right? I mean, Greek tragedy is inevitable because the fates will it. It's not because anything you did wrong it's just because the fates want it all to work out. So one day Oedipus wakes up and goes out front to deal with some stuff. And by the end of the day, it's all come undone.
What do you make of the fact that it's his foot that is his marker, just like Oedipus?
And Achilles as well.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you know what? I've been going on about Oedipus, and I forgot that Oedipus's limp is what marks him. Stupid.
Yeah.
Some English teacher I am.
My assumption here, they may have been incorrect, was that she sees the foot, realizes it's her son, and then sees the face and realizes it's the rapist.
Yes.
And this is when she puts it together.
She'd never put it together before.
She'd never had that realization because she'd never have seen his foot in the prison.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we should finish up before we start talking about the theme stuff because, but wait, there's more.
Okay, but wait, there's more. They do it. They get back, they go and they deliver
the brother and sister, dude.
The 2 letters. They find this guy, the brother and sister. They go and they find this guy. They deliver the 2 letters to him, and then they just like leave. They just give them to him and go. They're like, "Hello, we know you. You don't know us. Here are these letters," and then they're gone. This is really hard. Like, the letters are really tough. I mean, all of this movie is tough, but the letter, like, this conclusion is like,
it's shattering.
It's crushing. It's So the first letter is to the father. It's to the rapist. It's to the torturer. It's like, this brutal letter about like what, like, this is what you did. Yeah.
A condemnation.
Mm-hmm. And then the second letter is a forgiveness to the son.
It's to the son.
And it is.
It says, all I did my whole life was love you and look for you. And I love you always. And I'll love you forever. And you will always be beautiful. And,
Yeah. That's.
And in the first letter, she says, you'll read this and stand silent because in front of the truth, no one can say anything. I mean, basically she strips him of all of his power and then redeems him in the second. I got goosebumps talking about this.
Yeah.
And then the third letter is for the twins. And so you see the twins reading the third letter. And the third letter is basically like, where does the story of your life begin? Which I also think is really interesting because later on he will adapt a book called Story of Your Life for Arrival. It talks about where does the story of your life begin? If it begins with your birth, it's in a horror story. If it begins with your father's birth, it's a great love story. But because of that love, you were born of love too, basically. And he says nothing is as important as being together. And it's like this, I don't know, redemptive thing about family. And the last shot is the older brother alone looking at the gravestone in the sunlight.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This has been Cinema Bums.
Cinema bummed out,
Come
man.
back next week. A couple of classic quest things. I mean, just like D&D quest things that I really like about this ending is that the quest ends where it begins. That they have sort of gone to the other side of this world on this gigantic quest to find something, and it was back home the whole time.
Yeah.
I love that. You also find out that the notary is the one who wrote the letters, sort of transcribed them for the mother.
Oh,
so you find that the notary has known the whole time.
I didn't pick up on that.
Yeah.
Because it cuts to her after the incident, sort of whispering in his ear.
Oh,
and he has to write them.
And you see his face. So he, as the sage, as the guide, has known it all the whole time and is just like allowing them to go on their journey.
And he refuses several times to let...
That's why he refuses, because he knows they need to go on the journey.
Simon tries to refuse and he won't let him. And they talk about opening the letters. And he said, no, that would be like a rape, which does not go over well with Simon.
Simon has maybe the only joke in the movie, and certainly one of the darkest jokes of all time.
Yeah.
Which is he says, it runs in the family, I guess.
Yeah.
And it's maybe the only joke in the film.
There are a couple math jokes at the beginning.
Are there?
There's at least some funny stuff with the teacher, and he's like, God exists because of this math problem. And then the secretary at the math place doesn't want to talk to her.
Right.
There's like 1-2-minute section of humor at the beginning.
Right. That's Euler's thing, that it's a whole hard nerd situation. E to the I pi minus 1 equals 0. It's a hard nerd joke. Yeah, so it's funny. I mean, as soon as he said, "Here are these letters that you have to go deliver," I was like, "Ooh, a quest story. That's what this is." And then later, I was like,
Yeah.
"No, it's a Greek tragedy," because I mean, Oedipus Rex is written all over this play or all over this
Yeah.
movie. If you don't know Oedipus Rex, I'm going to do this very quickly. It's the story of this Greek king who is told that he has to find the murderer of the last king, and it turns out that he is the murderer. And the last king was, in fact, his own father, because Oedipus had, when he was born, unbeknownst to Oedipus himself, he is not his parents' son, the people he thinks of as his parents. He got a prophecy that said he would kill his father and marry his mother. On hearing that, he left home and never returned and went to a totally different city and killed a man on the road who shoved him aside in a random act of violence, and returned to this city of Thebes and banished the Sphinx, and was rewarded with the hand of the recently widowed queen and becomes the king. So he's married to his mother, having killed his father, right? I mean, that's this story almost, right?
Mhm.
Also, the twins about to be put in the river, like all the others. That could be Romulus and Remus.
Mhm.
The Achilles heel and Oedipus's heel. And Emmett, you were mentioning the light and dark, like moving towards the light. The characters in darkness moving towards this light reminds me a little bit of Orpheus.
And, you know what it else is the Oresteia. I mean, I joked about it earlier, but they are like Orestes and which is the Electra or no?
Electra, yes.
They are like the two of them moving away from violence, like breaking the cycle of violence and heading into like the light of day, which is like some people consider the Oresteia to be like talking about the progression out of barbarism into democracy, like in the ancient world. And like it could be partially about that as well, like the two of them as the children of violence who are able to like break the cycle of violence.
It is interesting because you think of like Greek tragedy and actually the Oedipus cycle has a sort of upward movement too. Oedipus dies at Colonus, but there's been another prophecy that makes him much sought after, because wherever his grave lies, I think, will be a blessed place. And so he does achieve some redemption over the cycle. It's sort of like reading Dante's Inferno, and you're like, well, that was bleak. And it's like, yeah, but it's just part one.
Yeah.
You got to read all three parts for it to make sense. Yeah, I started off thinking, oh, well, this will be a fun quest story. But then as you start to think, oh, is that Oedipus I hear chuckling in the background? That feels like so much more of a linear story to me, as opposed to a sort of a quest cycle that brings you back to where you began. Although you're right. I mean, they do end up back home with new knowledge that redeems their fallen world. It ticks the boxes.
And for me, at least, we mostly focused on the flashback stuff here in the recap. For me, at least, if the movie was just the flashbacks,
right,
I don't think I would have liked it. I'm not sure if I would have been able to stomach it.
Yeah.
It is really that it grounds it in at least what was very relatable to me of this like very modern people in the Western world sort of rediscovering the roots of their family and like going on this quest through like stranger in a strange land.
To that point, you know what I thought was really cool in all of that is when we're in the past in flashbacks, everybody is speaking, I think, mostly Arabic, and it is subtitled in English because the whole movie is subtitled. And when we're in the present day version, the 2009 version, and most people are speaking in French, when people speak in Arabic during those parts, it's not subtitled.
Yeah.
Because you are left in the position of the French speaking characters only in that time, and are like left out of the conversation because that's like what they're going through. Like in that scene where it's all the ladies and her in that room and they're all talking about her, but it's only being translated to her by the one lady who can speak French.
Yeah.
I just thought that was a really interesting touch.
Most of his audience is not going to speak fluent French and Arabic. Right. So part of his audience is going to be reading a big chunk of this movie. So a part of his audience is going to have this sort of foreknowledge of, even if only by a few seconds, of what's coming, which is just something that happens to me every time I watch a subtitled movie. There's this disconnection. It's not the same as getting totally immersed in, you sort of lean forward and fall into the screen.
Thankfully, in this, there aren't a lot of jokes whose punchlines get ruined by the subtitles coming up before they speak.
Yeah, that's one of the bright spots. I really thought, man, thank God there weren't more jokes that got ruined.
God.
And I feel like, we've been talking about this like such a downer, but this was such a powerful movie. It was so strong.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It was so good. I thought it was really remarkable the way the mother became so much more human to the viewer as you start to understand her story. Because at the beginning, you only know that her children are really angry and really sad. I mean, obviously sad that they've lost her, but her son is really angry at her. And her boss says, the notary was her boss for 18 years. And he says, I consider you family. It's quite clear that they don't consider him family.
Yeah.
But as the stories come closer together, he really does become family to them. Like he really is a protecting figure and sort of a father figure for them.
I also really like the other notary they bring in.
Yeah, I love him too.
The Lebanese notary is really cool.
Yeah.
And like the two of them talking about how if notaries had existed back in biblical times, like the Middle East wouldn't be so messed up.
Yeah.
That's a good joke. That is
a good joke. Do you feel like Denny has a buddy who's a notary and he like lost a bet and he was like, you have to make like the hero of your next movie a notary, like not the hero, but some character, like you got to put a notary in your movie.
Maybe.
But he is kind of a hero. Like there are as close to action scenes as you can get that involve like reading documents and opening letters and being there when you can be, In this movie, being a notary is a very noble profession.
Yes, absolutely. So go get your license, kids. It's not that difficult. You just got to take a little class and pass the test, and you too can get your little stamp.
Incredible.
Okay, well let's put it on record here at the end of the episode. Charles, flop or bop?
Oh man, this was a bop. It was hard to watch. I mean, it was difficult, but this is a bop all the way.
Emmett, flop or bop?
Bop. I'd have to agree. Yeah, I would definitely watch it again. I won't watch it again soon, but I will recommend it to people. And I think it's really quality stuff. How about you, Wade? Flop or bop?
Yeah, bop for me too. This to me is so August 32nd is kind of its own thing. That's a pretty light one. But I would say of the three Denny movies that are all like dark and brutal, like this one is, this is the first one to me that is worth the price it takes to watch it. Like this is the first one that is worth the journey it asks you to go on. Okay. And like gives you something equal in return. And it is hard. I also think it is by far the most dark of the three. Like, I think this is even much more dark than the school shooting movie. I think that this one, like, gives you something in return in a way that makes it worth it.
And I'm with you, Emmett. I would like to watch this again, not soon.
Yeah.
If this makes its way onto Amazon. And I mean, this is even a film. I teach a film class sometimes, and this is a film. This is a movie I would think about showing to a class to sort of consider as a real. I mean, this feels like a masterwork.
Yeah.
I mean, if you ask me, I mean, Arrival is cool and all, and there's a lot of cool visual stuff, and he's got the whole slew of resources available to help do the cool visual stuff. But as far as just a piece of filmmaking, I think I would rank this above Arrival, and I'm getting ahead of ahead of your schedule here. But I think this is a finer piece of filmmaking than Arrival, in my opinion. Yeah, I thought it was remarkable.
Yeah, this to me, along those lines, feels very much like a mission statement almost for Denny, like about sort of the things about violence and family that he's been examining throughout his career. And looking forward, I don't know, like he convinced me in this movie, and I sort of don't want to see him hammer at this point anymore. I don't know if he's going to, but I don't necessarily want to see any more movies that are about like this after seeing this one, because this one I think says maybe not everything there is to say, but like everything that needs to be said is said perfectly here. I think there is a theme that connects this and Polytechnique, which I wonder is part of the reason why he calls them his twins, is that they're both sort of about men doing horrible things to women because I think they see them as less than human. Like, I think the son in this movie, I think we understand he's the type of person who would never do that if he knew that was his mom, right? Like, would probably rather be shot and killed for disloyalty than do that to his own mother. But because he sees her as the enemy, as like less than human, he's willing to do that. And the same with the killer in Polytechnic, who sees feminists as less than human.
It's interesting. He's the oldest son is such a cipher in Incendies. I mean, the only things we know about him are what he does, right? We never, at the very end, when he gets the letters, we get to see a little bit of a reaction from him, and we see him standing at the grave, but we never see, I don't want to hammer at the Greek thing, but he is almost an instrument of fate. Like he's a tool that gets used, just the way war screws over this entire community, this national community and this family.
And it's so striking when you do see him at the end, because in the modern day, he just looks like a dude who you would hang out at the pool with. Yeah. Right? Or a dude who you talk to at a bar, and then you think about everything he's been through and everything he's done and how he's still there, just looking like anyone else in modern society at the end of the movie is. And I'm sure there are so many real people like that, Yeah. I think it is a hopeful ending.
Yeah.
I do too.
I think it is, for the twins and for the son. And for the mother.
And I think that's another thing that connects all four of these movies, weirdly, is like a brutally persistent existentialism of like, as long as you're alive, there's still hope. Like, as long as, and I think that's what it is like for all of the characters in all of these movies. Like the girl in August 32nd, it's a light take on that. For the young woman in Maelstrom, it's a lot heavier, but still like goes into some weird and kooky places. But like, I think that's what it is about the two paths that the characters take in Polytechnique, one to suicide and the other to like having the life that she wanted and the being able to have children and like say what she says at the end of that movie, even as trite as it might sound when she says it. But like, it seems like he's expressing that thing of like, you can, like, any person can pull through, but it's like a choice. But I've been like, that's what I've been reading into a lot of those things. Like, I think that quote from Maelstrom of like, all human actions are manifestations against death. I think like that is something that he is like still deeply interested in throughout all four of those movies.
Did either of you have any cultural context in regards to the actual Lebanon civil war?
So I was a kid during this Lebanese civil war, and the thing that we knew was that the barracks in Beirut got blown up by a suicide bomber. And if you go if you drive through Jacksonville, North Carolina, you'll see a memorial to the Marines who were killed there. I think it was 93 Marines were killed. It was a Marine barracks that got blown up. So that was the big deal. I mean, Americans care about wars when Americans get killed for the most part. And that was certainly true in the early 80s. Popped up and you'd see it on the nightly news sometimes. You'd see scenes from Beirut. It didn't have a major part of the zeitgeist except for the bombing of the barracks, which never even gets mentioned in this movie, right? This is such a personal take. I have been to Israel and up into northern Israel, which is, I was probably 40 miles from the border between Israel and Lebanon. And it looks like it was shot there. Although, Emmett, you said they shot some stuff in Jordan. And they shot it fast.
Yeah, all of the Middle East stuff was in Jordan.
I thought the way he used the landscape and the scenery as a kind of character in that, I mean, if you'll forgive the cliche, as a kind of character in those flashback scenes, and in the parts where Jean is looking for her mom, and Emmett, as you pointed out, you revisit the same spaces a couple of places.
You see what time does to a place, and like both like how some places have deteriorated and how other places have like popped up and have new life. Like as a big city, like a happening city, as opposed to like a torn out war zone, but other places are just like completely abandoned.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting to see a movie about a civil war where it doesn't really take sides on who is right and who is wrong. It's just brutal violence done by both sides. Characters that we care about fight on both sides, and neither really seem to have strong moral convictions about whether they should or should not have done it. Everybody's just like, we were there, we did that. That is what happened. It's obviously, I obviously would say that this movie is anti-violence and anti-war, but I don't think it comes down on saying one side or the other was worse. I think it just like accurately depicts that militias on both sides had very little regard for human rights.
If I can speak to that really quickly.
Yeah.
Because I was really critical of the last two movies for, I didn't think, having a perspective on the violence they were showing. And this movie, to me, like, you're right, doesn't take a side in the war, but the perspective is Denny's perspective that the war is dumb, right?
That the war is horrible and awful and stupid. Yeah.
Murdering anyone for their religion, specifically in this movie, but just like murdering anyone is like a ridiculous, stupid, dumb thing to do.
Yes.
And for me, that was crystal clear in the scene with the girl, the bus scene where they kill the little girl, which is sort of like almost like a 10-minute long, like, sequence with a bunch of sort of highs and lows in terms of, that's probably the closest thing to an actual action sequence we've seen him stage so far. Yeah, and so to me, like, that is something I loved, and I think Denny was kind of aware of that too, is that he is not at the heart of this conflict, but he has something to say about it, which is that it shouldn't happen.
Yeah. I also think it's interesting, like, I think this tackles the nonlinear storytelling in the best way that he's done it so far. And this is the first one of his movies that, even though it felt nonlinear, I felt like all of them were going to eventually connect to a final conclusion. Where in some of the other ones, it just feels like pieces that are going pell-mell.
I felt like the chapter titles helped me have some faith in that.
Yeah.
The fact that he was
me
compartmentalizing his story a little bit. He was saying, this is about this is about that, this is about that. I think this was an extraordinary film.
Yeah,
that's what
me too. I've got a little bit of behind the scenes info on it. We've covered a good amount of it. But like I said, this was based on a play by Wajdi Mouawad. He was born in Lebanon, and his parents were from there. They left 1 year into the Civil War when Wajdi was 8, and he grew up in Montreal. So the playwright sort of has that very intimate connection to the story here. But it is also based on, as Emmett was saying, the life of Suha Bekarah. Sorry about my pronunciation throughout this whole series. Who tried to assassinate a general, was kept in prison for 10 years. And Wajdi worked with Suha directly in writing the play. So this play comes out in 2003. Denny sees it in 2004 in the middle of his 10-year-long sabbatical away from filmmaking. He says that the play is a masterpiece and he wants to make it as a silent film. Which I thought was pretty interesting. That's his take for like a long time. And what he's trying to sell the playwright on is like, there's no dialogue at all. You're taking a play which is just dialogue and doing it with no dialogue and seeing if he can tell this story. And then eventually he sort of gave up on that. And he wrote a few scenes to get the playwright's permission to work on it. And then once he had that permission, he wrote it slowly over 5 years while he was in his sabbatical and while he was making Polytechnic before this.
Wow.
Yeah, and then the only other thing I've got is that the opening of this with the child soldier getting his head shaved is soundtracked by the Radiohead song, You and Whose Army. Denny said that that was his attempt to like explain that this was a Westerner's view of this conflict rather than sort of like an inward view. Obviously not in some ways from the characters, but specifically from him himself, that like he was not a Lebanese Iranian filmmaker making this movie. He was like a window into it from a Western view.
Well, and the kids, when they go back to try and uncover the history, sort of have that, even though they look kind of like the people they're talking to, their dress, their haircuts, all that, like they, you know, they stick out, you know, and they need translators, you know, they don't speak the language either.
Yeah. And they don't seem to have been raised, immersed in that culture in any sort of way.
No, because Jean doesn't have any Arabic at all to speak of, right? She's carrying around a phrase book, right? She's carrying around this little Berlitz translator book.
Yeah, she can say like hello. All right. You doing MVPs?
Yeah, I think we're to MVP here.
Okay.
So Charles, we'll start with you. Who would we say is off the table? Probably the mother?
I'd say the mother and the twins are off the table for MVPs.
Okay.
Okay, so other than the mother and the twins, who's your fave?
I mean, the easy play is the Notary, who I thought was great. And I was thinking about this while I was watching it. The funny thing is, except for the Notary, there's almost no other character who's on screen for more than a scene, right? I mean, it's such a journey, such a little episodic. Like, we went to here, and then we went to here, and then we went to here. I thought about the grandmother from the beginning because I thought she was really strong, but I think I'm going to go with the Christian warlord from the end. I thought the warlord at the end was really, you think warlord and you're going to get ravening lunatic, but he was this just sort of old, kind of sad, quiet, powerful guy. And I thought that scene worked really well. I mean, I think there were a bunch of really good 5-minute performances, but I'm going to go with the guy. I didn't write his name down because
Shamsuddin.
Thank you. Shamsuddin. Yeah, that's my man.
I mean, I'll say I don't think the acting misses in this whole movie. Like, I don't think anyone gives in a performance that's less than entirely convincing throughout the whole thing.
Yeah.
Emmett, who's your MVP?
I mean, yeah, everybody in this kills it. So there was one person, though, when he came on, I said, this is my MVP unless something drastically changes. This was like halfway through the movie. It's the old guy that she talks to in the schoolhouse. Who like starts to unravel. She's like the first guy who like gives her some information. Once he realizes who she is, he's like willing to tell her. Because at first he's like, no, I'm not going to talk to you. And then he like tells her the whole story. And he just seemed so real. I believed he was that guy. Yeah. Yeah. Amazing.
Totally.
How about you, Wade? MVP?
I liked a lot of them. I also thought about the Canadian Notary, who I want to mention used to be a game show host in Canada for a long time, which I think tracks for me. But my MVP is Notary Madad. It is the notary in the foreign country who is sort of their man there. I think he's really good. I think it's also just like so exciting when we finally get to him because it's like,
when we get more notaries. Now we have two notaries on screen. How many notaries can you have in a movie? And the answer is 2.
Yeah, we talk a lot about representation in film, and finally some good notary representation in these movies. But when we get to him, it's like the present day plot is like really getting somewhere now. And you've watched the twin sister sort of just like walk from place to place and try and figure things out. And it's like now they have someone who knows what's going on and like can help them. And he's very charming. There's like a fun scene too where he has to pretend to be the brother's taxi driver and like pass off that he doesn't know what's going on to like work their way into the local community. Yeah, so he's my MVP. I liked him a lot.
Never mess with a notary. They're multi-talented people.
And apparently there's a whole notary network. They all know each other all over the world.
That's right.
All right, let's end with a little quiz.
Okay.
We're going to play Bums the Word. So this movie, Incendies, is on a lot of lists of the best movies with plot twists of all time.
Okay.
Which I knew before this. I did not know anything at all about what happened, but just when I had searched for the trailer, a bunch of videos popped up that were like 30 best movies with plot twists. And Incendies was one of them. So today we're going to see who can guess 7 movies I've got here that are all featured on the best plot twists of all time. And I'll say these are all well-known movies with big twists that I thought were fair. They're not all sort of the ones that spring to mind when you think.
Is Mulan
plot
on there?
Twist movie. Is what?
Mulan?
No.
She's a girl the whole time. It's a huge twist. It's a
Wait. But y'all, there's this movie that you won't believe. It's about bugs, but they're talking.
No way.
That's the plot twist.
Is Empire Strikes Back on there?
It's not one of the 7 I picked, but it was on every list.
Okay.
But it's not one of these 7. Movie number 1. This is a film from 1999. It is adapted from a novel. It is sort of the breakthrough of a director who's kind of similar to Denny in that he's very much like dark adult thriller, very well known and beloved.
Is it The Sixth Sense?
It is not.
99. Based on
a novel, starring two big leading men of the time. The two main characters are both men, and they're like very popular actors.
Is this Shawshank Redemption?
No. This movie is kind of controversial because of the tone it takes with its subject matter.
Oh, no, it's not that one.
This is sort of a case where the book that it's adapting is much more clearly...
Oh, this is Fight Club.
This is Fight Club. Oh. That's right.
God, how is Fight Club 22 years old?
Isn't that crazy?
Ugh.
Yeah, directed by David Fincher with Brad Pitt and Edward Norton. Okay, oh wow, I did not intend this. Movie number 2 is also from 1999. This is also a breakthrough movie for a director, although this is like a much more controversial sort of up and down director.
Is this The Sixth Sense?
This is The Sixth Sense.
Okay, there we go. I was going to say, I feel like we're narrowing in.
Yeah, those are the two big ones. I feel like there was some sort of plot twisting in the air there, because you've got those two. You've got Usual Suspects, like 7 right around then.
7. I was thinking about 7, but I saw that in New York. That was 96.
Movie number 3 is from 2017. It is a part of a very popular series, maybe the most popular series of the moment. It's kind of actually a part of 2 series and is a big deal in terms of them like coming together for the first time.
Oh, okay.
That might be...
Is that the twist?
No. So that might be a poor way to phrase that. Like, don't get hung up on that.
Is this Rogue One?
This is not Rogue One. This is the other big Disney franchise.
I think it's either Guardians 2 or Avengers Endgame, whichever one brings in... Or Avengers Infinity War, whichever brings in the Guardians into the
It's neither
MCU.
of those, but it is an MCU movie.
A twist.
The twist in this movie, much like the one we watched, has to do with the way the main characters are related to each other.
Is it Black Panther?
It's a big summer blockbuster. I mean, I guess MCU sort of predates that. This is a New York movie. This is very much a movie about...
Oh, is this the Iron Man about Winter Soldier? About Winter Soldier killing the Iron Man's parents?
No.
Okay. See, I'm down with the movies that the young people enjoy.
This is the most popular superhero in the world for like the last 20 years. This is like the superhero who way more than anyone else. I think like number 2 is Batman, and this superhero is number 1 by like...
Spider-Man?
It's a Spider-Man movie.
Oh, is it the Spider-Verse?
Spider-Man
Spider-Verse?
No, it's neither of the two.
Is it Spider-Man: The Incredible Journey Far From Home? Return to Home?
No. Someone's got to give me the real title here.
Spider-Man Homecoming?
That's correct.
Okay.
What's the twist? That Mary Jane is in that movie?
No, that's a late in the game twist. The twist it's talking about is that like 2/3 of the way through, you find out that the bad guy, the Vulture, spoilers for Spider-Man Homecoming, that the bad guy is the father of Spider-Man's girlfriend, which is just something you haven't known up until that point.
That's not a twist.
It is. It's a huge twist.
Isn't that the one where Buster Keaton turns out to have really been the one from Birdman and flies in on an atomic vulture to kill Spider-Man?
Yeah, you've gotten it exactly right, Emmett. Exactly right.
Yeah, except it's Harold Lloyd. Nobody can ever remember which one's which.
Movie number 4 is from 2019. It is another foreign language film. Also, like Incendies, sort of the major American breakthrough of this foreign director.
Is it Parasite?
It is Parasite.
Oh, well played.
Okay, number 5, we've got 3 more. The score right now is Emmett 3, Charles 1, but still anyone's game here.
Okay.
This movie is from 2006. It is directed by a superhero director who, between his superhero movies, is doing other sort of like more adult genre films. and it has two big superhero stars of the time as the leading men in this movie who are sort of in a competition of sorts.
Oh.
Is this
The
the
Prestige.
Prestige? We're going to have to call that one a draw.
Yeah, we're gonna have points for both on that.
Yeah, I will give a point for both because that was equal timing from where I was sitting. It is The Prestige.
It's a great movie.
It is Batman versus Wolverine with magic. What are you?
That's right, with
kidding
Michael
me?
Caine.
Movie number 6. This is a 2013 film. It is adapted from a classic story, although it takes a lot of liberties. I'm trying to think of what I can say that will not
Is
immediately
this
give
the
it
Brothers Grimm, or
No,
is it in like the fairy tale world?
it's adapted from a fairy tale. This is a family movie.
Is it Mirror Mirror?
Or Maleficent?
You're getting closer. It's not Maleficent.
What was the Snow White one? These are sometimes on in the background in my house.
Snow White and the Huntsman?
It's not. It's an animated movie.
Oh.
It's an animated movie. The twist in this movie is sort of what you expect from genre conventions of this type of movie.
Oh, is it Tangled?
No, but you're on the right path here.
Or Frozen.
It's Frozen.
Okay.
Is it Frozen 2013?
All right.
2013.
Throw
Good
some
Lord.
spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks. My chances of getting out of this life without seeing Frozen many times are pretty slim. And the longer I put off the first time I see it, the fresher it'll be the last time I see it.
That's fair.
Emmett's approach towards movie viewing as a youth was foundational in this attitude.
This is I mean, Wade knows, and any regular listener of the pod will know that my criteria for movies is: would I watch it again right now and on repeat for the rest of my life, or would I never watch that again?
Right.
And it's one or the other.
Yes.
It's the two categories.
Yeah.
Oh, I know. When Emmett was about 7, I asked his mom if it would be okay with her if I showed him Star Wars for the first time. And he said, "Why don't you wait just another year or two?" I said, "Well, I think he's old enough." She said, "No, he's old enough. I just don't want to talk about nothing but Star Wars yet. I just want to put off that phase of my life a little while longer."
Because it's going to be 10 years at least.
Yes, and he's
Once
going
it
to have
starts.
details. The boy is going to a detail-oriented kid.
The other day, people were talking about, like, what is the movie you've seen the most in your life? And everyone was talking about ones they've seen, like, 4 or 5 times as an adult.
Oh, my
I was
God.
like, nothing can compare to what I watched as a kid. Like,
Yeah.
it probably is Toy Story 2 that I just watched 800 times as a kid, or
Man.
something along those lines.
Probably Jurassic Park for me.
Probably got to be Star Wars. Or, you know what? Caddyshack and Strange Brew might be up there just based on weekends during high school when my buddies and I would hang out. We were happy and deeply not cool and totally okay with that.
Okay, the last film we've got here. This is a 1960 horror film from a very famous director.
I got it.
Uh-huh.
Is this Psycho?
It's Psycho. Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho.
It's so great. Have you guys seen Psycho?
I haven't.
Oh, my. Wait.
I want
great.
to. We talked at one point about doing every Hitchcock movie, which I think is like 60, doing a year of Hitchcock.
You'd have to do 3 films a day.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't really want to do that.
Yeah. No.
Because like I know there's a lot of good stuff, but there's also just probably a lot of
Oh, no.
not
He was churning stuff out.
Yeah, he did like one a year and in silent film era. Like he did a ton of silent films and a ton of talkies that were both successful.
Yeah. One thing I realized about Hitchcock when I was in grad school, saw a screening of North by Northwest on a big projector, and Hitchcock works so much better big. So if you're going to watch Hitchcock, get a projector and get a sheet and hang it on the wall and throw it up big.
This has never happened before, but it's a tie because you tied on one of them. Yeah, so congratulations to both.
Even honors on both sides.
awesome.
All right. Charles, any final thoughts about Incendies?
I appreciate that you guys got me to watch this movie. It's not a movie I would have settled down for. It's certainly not one I would have looked up myself, but I'm glad to have seen it. And I know we've been like, man, this movie was a downer, but it really Wade, as you said, it gives you something for the work it puts you through.
Mm-hmm.
And I really am glad to have seen it.
Emmett?
I would agree. And I was going to say earlier, I think it's really interesting to see a movie set in the Middle East that's not from an American military perspective. Something that you don't really get in American films hardly ever.
Yeah.
Really enjoyed it. Should watch it. Wade, how about you?
I agree. I really don't think I have anything else to add other than that, if you think that you can handle this, then watch it, because it's brutal and it puts you through it, but I think it's incredible. I think it's worth it. And I'm really excited to see, I guess this is when he moves to America and starts doing the English language films. I just wonder where he goes from here.
Yeah.
You got to think that if this came out in America, whoever played the mother would have gotten the Oscar. This thing would have gotten so much more attention.
Yep.
Because it's incredible.
Yep. Glenn Close.
Glenn Close is the mom. Yeah, probably. Probably.
Scarlett Johansson.
Yeah, right. Toby Maguire is the kids.
Oh, God.
Oh, man. Well, Charles, thanks so much for being here. Is there anything you'd like to plug? Anywhere that people can find you if they want to?
Yeah, I'm on Facebook because I'm older than you guys. I don't have much of a social media presence. I'm working on I'm in the early days of work on a musical project, but I'll have to plug that later on.
Ooh.
Yeah, nothing's on paper yet. I'm doing a lot of sort of cogitating about it, but I hope that'll be something I start getting ink on paper before too long.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Cool.
All right, next week we're going to be back. Actually, next week we're going to be back talking about Candyman.
Oh, whoa.
The new Candyman movie. We're going back to our Jordan Peele series that was written by Jordan Peele, directed by Nia DaCosta. So I think that comes out on Thursday night, and we'll be back on Tuesday talking about it. So
oh, wow.
If you feel comfortable going out to a theater and seeing it, then we'll be there shortly after to talk about it.
Right on.
And in 48 weeks, we'll be back to talk about Jordan Peele's Nope. We're continuing the countdown.
It'll be 1 week after you get to Dune finally, because you can't watch it till Wade's finished the book.
Oh, no.
Oh, no.
That would be a real motivator. Listen, I've really enjoyed it so far.
Well, that's good.
It has not been difficult to read, per se.
You're reading all 7, right? In the spirit of this show, you're going to read the entire thing
in order.
Charles, I've read all 6 that Frank Herbert actually wrote.
Have you really? My brother made it halfway through the 3rd or 4th one and put it down with a sort of stunned look on his face that told me everything I needed to know, I think.
All right, Charles.
All right, guys.
Frosted.
Thanks so much.
Bye. Cinema Bums is a production of DKG Podcasts. It is created and produced by Emma Temple and me, Wade Lawrence Holloman. I also edit and mix the podcast. Our theme music is by Zane Holloman, who you can find on Bandcamp, and our show art is by Autumn Beckner. Our social media is managed by Laura Bennett. If you like what you hear, please tell all your friends, and leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, the 2 best ways to spread the word about our work. You can also follow us on Instagram @CinemaBums or email us at cinemabumspod@gmail.com. Don't flake on us. We'll be back next week.